Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Next season, Chapter 3. Okay, before we get started, for any of you who have not yet seen the first few videos for the next season, I suggest you go view those now, as this is a continuation of that story. From the moment she said, "May the Force be with you," she knew what her role would be. Junk ship, impossible odds, chopper at her back. "This is a real Hera Syndulla situation," her friends would be saying on the ground, rolling their eyes. Everything that made her Hera woke up and rose to the occasion. "Watch this, Thrawn. Watch what I can do." When she burst through the half-constructed dome, slamming into hyperspeed because Chopper's calculations were perfect and Sabine's patch job had worked, she yelled in triumph, then knocked poor Chop over with a hug. He continued to sing his own praises from the ground. "Yeah," she said, "we did it. I'm not ready to stop. Are you?" And then, after they practically bent reality to escape, the council dragged its feet. "Well, I don't know if we can afford to comment. You see, there are so many other priorities." Hera had played enough hollow vid games as a child to know you don't pick and choose which threats to neutralize. She wasn't about to be benched because they didn't realize the scope of the problem. "We have momentum," she thought. "If we don't win now, we die later. Let's not hand them the galaxy on a platter." So she convinced them, and they gave her a promotion in lieu of real support. Well, that wasn't quite fair. They committed 2 squadrons, 12 fighters and 12 bombers, to defeat an entire army deployed in a planet-wide blockade. "Go ahead, General, see what you can do." She thought back for the 100th time to a conversation with her aunt, just before she left Ryloth. "You are a Twi'lek and a woman," Aunt Trey had said. "People are going to put you in impossible situations just to watch you fail. That will confirm their beliefs about you." And because she was leaving, Hera had taken the time to listen. "So what do I do?" Hera's aunt had blinked at her as if she were stupid. "You win. Just do the impossible. No big deal." Well, she'd seen Kanan leap into the air and fly simply by trusting he could do it. And she had trained these kids who were now bouncing impatiently, waiting for their ships to finish fueling. They were quick and bold as lightning. Chopper blatted excitedly behind her. X-Wing, X-Wing. Okay, they had given her good fighters, at least. She had some idea about tricks to try with those S-folds. Want to play? She asked him. He was the only person in the galaxy who would chortle with glee at that suggestion. When her X-Wing hummed with the building power of takeoff, she gave her pep talk to the team. I have never seen a group of pilots like you. Get in there full speed, don't stop moving, and have fun. You do that and they'll never touch you. Mark hummed in. We're with you all the way, General. Then they jumped. She closed her eyes and imagined her childhood as they traveled, swinging through trees and cartwheeling across the ground, playing fighter pilots and winning every time. If you don't hold still, they couldn't get a shot at you. When the alarm pinged 5-minute warning for their arrival, she opened her eyes. Time to take care of business. She put her hand on her abdomen for the briefest of moments and felt, of course, nothing. Okay, kid, she thought, this is going to get rough. Again, you're going to have to take your chances like the rest of us. Then she thought of each member of her squadron, also her kids. She trained them. They were all depending on upon each other, and they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that they wouldn't falter. And they were about to die. Some of them anyways, and she'd have to keep flying even without even a pause to blink. Just tuck their memories away and mourn them later. She'd done it before. The hyperdrive monitor bleeped more urgently. Building to that moment, they jumped back into real space. It was time. All right, let's make this count. Mathal's depending on us. Remember, the Imperial Fuel Depot is our primary target. And then she fought. And she won. Except the Empire had too many ships. It wasn't fair. No matter what she threw at them, they had more. She thought she'd beaten the game when they entered the atmosphere. But she had only beaten the first level. Well, she had a choice about which ships to get to the ground, and the bombers were by far more valuable. When their army of TIEs spread out in front of her, she braked hard and turned her belly to them. Get the other ships behind her. They could still man a bombing run. But they couldn't. A dozen fighters staffed her X-Wing with cannon fire, and then they shot her squadron away. Behind her, John yelled in alarm. Zebra said, General, it's been an honor. No, she told them. Remember what we practiced. Aim for the city. All you need is your cockpit and enough of your wings to make it to the ground. The Empire hadn't blown her to bits yet, and it wasn't over. She knew how to land using only the wind. The ground was coming up fast. Avoid the houses. Raise the nose. Air brake. She blacked out. If Chopper hadn't opened the cockpit dome, she'd be dead, suffocated on the smoke from her own burning control panels. And as it was, she didn't feel great. Head, right arm, her dominant arm. She could travel with an injured arm, with an injury to the arm. Might even be able to fire a blaster with it. But the obvious concussion, that was going to be a problem. Then they got moving, Chopper prodding her in the back of the thighs with an electrical shock, and that brought her around nicely. When she found Mart, she realized that she could gather her forces and keep fighting. Then Ruku arrived. He moved faster than she could track, but his style was textbook. Left shoulder, left knee, right knee. She went on autopilot, her body recalling decades of training sessions with Kanan. Block, block, punch. A twist, and he took her to the ground. Ouch, block, block, retreat. Thighs around his head. Your strongest muscle. Kanan had told her. This time she dropped him. She suspected Roku was the better fighter, but he had been given orders to bring her in unharmed. Well, largely unharmed. Her body kicked in where her brain failed. Fight, fight, run. Kanan was out there. Kanan and Ezra and Sabine and Zeb. And if she moved fast enough and hit hard enough, she could get to them. Find something big and ram it into anything between you and them. Just hit over and over until any resistance gives. A speeder, huh? That would do nicely. And when it came to that moment, the final moment when the Imperial tanks stacked up against her, she still managed to get Mart and Chopper away. Hera Syndulla 2, Empire 1. She called that a victory right up until Governor Price shot her. She came to flat on her back in an Imperial interrogation chair with her arms strapped down, her eyes swollen shut, a few teeth loose, and bruises up her arms and legs. And they were treating her? Thrawn peered down with that detached interest, as if she were some new specimen of beetle for him to dissect and study. She won't give you good information if she cannot remain conscious, he explained to Governor Price. He turned to the medical droid. Treat all her injuries. A contemptuous sniff. Then you can have her, Governor. Hera realized that she should be faking unconsciousness a moment after he noticed her. Ah, Captain Syndulla. Awake, I see. Never fear. 22G will heal you in short order. Then we'll talk again. A chirp of discom. He glanced at it, then turned to Price. Try not to bungle the interrogation. Then he left. Good. That would give her a chance. Price sneered in disgust. Call me when she is cleaned up. Hera closed her eyes as the droid injected her with something, and the pain blissfully faded. The first shock was bad, but all the others were worse. No matter how she tried to anticipate them, each one set a jolt of surprise and panic down her spine. That was worse than the pain, the feeling of terror squeezing her heart. It was really just electricity, but it felt like fear. Price hadn't even asked her any questions. She could hold on. She could. It hurt like fire, but the pain came over her in waves, then stopped for long enough that she could catch her breath and center herself again. And Kanan was coming for her. She didn't know how he'd do it, but as sure as she felt her own heart beating, she knew it. She was still alive, and he was on his way. Price pushed the button again, and the voltage ripped through her, catching her off guard. Come on, Kanan, hurry. She couldn't remember all of it. That was the worst part. Her last moments with him, and they drugged her with something that made her sloppy and her memories patchy. The Empire had even taken her memory. She remembered the needle coming at her and thinking, no, I don't want what's in that. I don't know what it's going to do to me. And then relaxing, though she tried to fight against it. She was supposed to be holding something back. What was it? Every object in the room was surrounded by a halo of light, even Governor Price. And Hera tried to tell her why it was funny, but she wasn't sure whether she'd spoken or not. We're all bound together, connected by the Force, Kanan had said. Hera could see it now, a great benevolent thing that made her want to share all that she had. Her friends. Price was asking something. Where are the rebels? She had to get back to her friends. And then Kanan was there. He had come to her. He shone with that light that made everything splendid, and then came abruptly into focus. Climbing. What had he done to his face? I have to tell you something, she told her guards, who probably weren't such bad guys after all. You're in terrible trouble. And then he was there, leaping up through the floor. The second stormtrooper flew through the window with a dramatic shatter of plexiglass. Where had the first gone? He was using his lightsaber, and he moved his shoulder in that instinctive rotation that even now tugged at something in the pit of her stomach. Her beautiful boy. What had he done to his hair? Her hands came abruptly free, and the room went a little sideways. Kanan set her on her feet, and she started to feel better. She said some stupid things. Kanan, you haven't gotten me a present since we first met, only to remember abruptly that this was untrue. She really needed to tell him soon. The gliders, she remembered. The glorious rush of the wind with no noise of an engine. These things had Sabine spray-painted all over them. Kanan teased her about crashing. Then up the fuel pod to the top, side by side, just like the old days. They were going to make it. She was supposed to tell him something. The light around the edges had faded, but if she tried, she could just remember. Him, her, everything else in the galaxy, of course, but the two of them at the center of it, running and fighting next to each other, and with space enough for what they needed. I love you, she said, and then his lips were on her lips, and his face against her face. The kids showed up with their ride. Her hand was in Kanan's. And then the fuel pod exploded. The edges of the world lit up again, only this time it was fire. Hera rushed towards Kanan, her head abruptly completely clear. He'd hold off the blast. She could get him out of there. They could do this. Then his hand flew out at her, and she stopped in place, paralyzed, hovering right in the air as he held the blast off with a single hand. And he looked at her. He looked right at her. He was saying goodbye. No, he wasn't dead yet. This hadn't happened yet. It didn't have to happen. He held her there, completely helpless, while he said goodbye. He had known this. The heat intensified. The bubble he created in front of them wouldn't last much longer. She watched him without blinking. Kanan, with the scar across his nose and the stupid haircut, and then his eyes unclouded, clear and glass green as ever, and his gaze focused, and they caught each other's souls. She flew backwards and hit Ezra hard a moment before the blast, and she didn't see him go. The light from the explosion was everywhere, and her ears were ringing, and somehow Sabine had managed to fly them away, up higher and higher. She was coming unmoored, floating up into the sky. The noise of the blast died off, and Hera realized she was screaming. Maybe it was no. Maybe it was just some incoherent vowel sound, but it went on, ripping out of her body, and after she stopped to take a breath, it just started again. Ezra held her tightly, sobbing as if he were retching, his body convulsing. He was probably keeping them in place with a force grip. Neither one of them had bothered to hang on to anything. Hera went hoarse, then finally collapsing on the deck in a coughing fit, and that made her stop screaming. Go back for him, she almost said. The urge was so strong she could barely hold it in. Go back and get him right now before it's too late. Turn around, save him. But if they went back, what would they do? It was already too late. Fight, Hera. fight, she told herself. There has to be something. She hit the deck with an angry fist. It hurt. Again. She had to do something. Again and again until Sabine yelled, "Stop it!" Then she collapsed flat on her stomach against the deck and sobbed the little bit that her body would allow. Ezra had curled up in the corner, moaning quietly to himself, mumbling, "Please, Kanan, please." Sabine flew steadily, only an occasional strangled cough from the cockpit. How was she doing it? The deck vibrated beneath Hera's hips and cheek, and a solid surface to moor her against that floating feeling. She had sounded like she was dying, she realized. She'd never heard anybody scream like that, and Ezra and Sabine had suffered the same loss, and she made them listen to her scream. "Stop it, Hera." "Sabine," she said, then coughed. Her voice was mostly gone. "You did great, thank you. You did great." Sabine didn't answer. Just a small strangled moan that meant she was angry crying up there. Hera pulled herself up and crawled over to Ezra, every movement struggling against a great weight. The planet's gravity had grown unbearable. When she got there, she could only lean her forehead against his leg, and he didn't manage to move at all. But at least he knew she was there. "Good kids," she said roughly. She was going to die. Everything inside her hurt like death. They broke me, she thought. I wondered what it would be like to be tortured until I broke. And this is it. "We put them together," she imagined Kanan saying. "We depend on you." But she just laid there and waited for death to swoop down for her.